Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Hopefully, you were able to find parking in the garage. If you're not aware, you can park free here in the garage and just, come down the elevators. Call our number. We'll let you in. Because after 6 o'clock, the elevator doors, are locked. All right, cool. So again, Orlando JS. This month we're gonna do things a little different. If you've been to this meetup before, you probably know it's usually a talk followed by lightning talks. This month we decided to change things up a bit. So we're gonna have a roundtable. We'll have 3 guests over here. We're gonna have sort of an open conversation around the topic of how to stay current in the JavaScript ecosystem. If you've worked long enough, we have new tools, new techniques, new versions of the language coming up every couple months, sometimes every day here into live reacting stuff. And it's pretty hard to stay up to date. So the conversation today is like, how do we do that as professionals, as people experienced in the industry, or as people that are just coming into the industry, or people that haven't actually entered the industry yet. If you're just a student, or if you're considering starting into the development career, this is the place for you here tonight, and ask questions. So we have experienced developers here, but it's going to be great if we can have the participation of everybody here in the room, either with comments, suggestions, or questions of your own as well. Let's jump into our roundtable discussion. So we have our 3 guests here today. We have Sandra, we have Victor, and then we have Vincent. Thank you, everybody, for coming here and sharing. So we're going to start with a couple of questions, and just kind of to know a little bit more about each one of you. So if you can go from left to right, and then we go from there. So tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got started into the development industry, and more specifically into JavaScript, kind of what you do.
Yeah. So hi, I'm Cassandra. I don't even remember how long I've been doing stuff. It's like somewhere around 10 years, and then you forget to increment after that. But I got in high school I was math, science, biology, something, doctor, lawyer, I don't know. And then I didn't get into a photography class. I got into Photoshop instead. And that started this digital media thing that I didn't really know about. And then I took, it was desktop publishing and web development. So I learned Word and Excel and HTML in that class. And then I used that to pimp out my MySpace. And so I didn't realize what I was doing at the time. And then from there, I decided that I would stick with graphic design, and I was sort of freelancing logo design, and then got into web development at a time when you could get away with selling websites that were HTML and CSS only. So this was 2006, 2007. And I interned at a local marketing, a little marketing company here, and then their web developer left, and suddenly I had to manage PHP sites, and I did not know what I was doing. And I started getting into JavaScript, just completely self-taught, and I really didn't know the difference between JavaScript and PHP, because they are, programming languages are all very similar, but clearly you can do JavaScript on the front end, and so that's what I ended up doing. And so I was freelancing until I was just not making enough money to pay my bills, and I was I need to stop doing design because I really don't know what, I don't know, and do programming because that's where the money's at. So I studied more, I got a job at an agency, and my JavaScript skills were terrible, even though I told them that my JavaScript skills were good. I was still trying to figure out how to copy paste jQuery and make that work. And then after doing .NET Nuke theming for a little bit, I got to do some jQuery mobile, and then I got to move over to our app development team when Angular came out, and so we were doing Angular at that time, and that was super fun. I really liked product development. And then after that, after 4 years there, decided to quit and go back to freelancing, and then me and 2 of my friends formed a company to do app development for startups, and we decided to take on React at that time, which was a whole paradigm shift, and I learned a lot from that, and that's what we've been doing ever since. So that's me.
Nice, very cool. I think MySpace should be credited with so many people getting into the web industry, right? Because if you're sitting at the computer around that era, chances are if you had free time, chances are you were doing something with MySpace, right? Either like navigating or trying to mod your page or trying to mod your band's page, or checking out music and checking out CSS and HTML, copying and pasting and see what sort of effects that had. So yeah, that's awesome. How about you, Victor?
Right on. Yeah, so it's kind of funny how I got started. Originally, I thought that I wanted to do IT work, and then I realized that it was much harder to like gain experience because you actually needed hardware to work on. So I took up learning. It was like an introductory JavaScript course on this site called Codecademy. So it was just like self-taught tutorial, and like it was history from there. Like I fell in love immediately. Started practicing a lot. Like I started with this like $200 laptop. It was not much, but it totally like paved the way for my growth, right? And at the time I was going to Valencia and got an internship with a company in Altamont. They do like it's like insurance agency basically. And I worked with them as a junior for a while and also did like some call support for them, like troubleshooting software that we already had. And I learned about this hackathon that was happening. It was like a year later. I learned about this hackathon, went over there and ended up landing a job with the company. The company was called Gravitational Marketing. And they do agency as well. It's like advertisement for car dealerships. So when I got on with them, I came on as QA and also doing junior tasks. That's where I really started to like cut my teeth on things. And I tried to advise that to like anybody who's asking me like, how do you get into the space? For me, like learning QA before I actually was doing more development tasks was really like productive for me. It really helped like me understand, because I would be given tasks that like other developers had completed, and I'm going to like manually test it and try to find the flaws. So as you start to break things intentionally, you realize what it takes to make them better. So did that for a while and ended up leading to another opportunity where I worked with a buddy of mine. You might know him, Andrew Duchesne. He was at Partners Federal Credit Union. Stayed with them for a while and then learned about another opportunity after about a year or so with them. This place called Fat Merchant, which is right in our backyard over here. Really awesome company. Have nothing but good things to say about them. And then that took me to another opportunity where I'm at now, working for a company based out of Boston. They're a cybersecurity company. And I do front-end engineering, so the stack that I use is React, and we use TypeScript for pretty much everything.
Nice, very cool. Does anyone here do like kind of works with the same stack as Victor said, like React and TypeScript? Yeah, cool, nice. Cool. How about you, Vincent?
Yeah, so my programming career, it's kind of hard to find when it really started, because I used to do game modding as a kid, making my own StarCraft maps, like when I was in elementary school, but I haven't really done anything since then. When I graduated from University of Florida, I had my bachelor's degree in material science engineering, and I thought I wanted to be a scientist for the rest of my life, and I did 3 years of research for NASA and for Samsung during university times. But I realized I really didn't like research, because you spend like hours and hours on time like doing something, and then you lose your sample, and then you lost 100 hours of work of your life, right? So I ended up transitioning and pivoting entirely over to actually construction management, believe it or not. And I actually designed a bunch of restaurants in town. Actually, some in Disney, some in other places, and I used to adopt a lot of project management tools to manage a lot of the subcontracting work that we had to do at the company. And it got to the point where I started to like overuse those software tools, and like to the point where I needed to write my own for the specific things that I needed. And I would ask like these developers at like different like software companies to like build it out, and they told me no, because they didn't have time. So I had a guy from Poland like teach me how to reverse engineer like someone's software, and learn how to like look through and do network requests and figure out how to like get their API, or find out what their API is and make calls to it and write my own extensions on top of it. So I kind of started off on the unethical side of programming, and I also did a lot of web scraping as well for the company, because it was in e-commerce. So I also did e-commerce development as well, and I would also look at other people's websites and kind of figure out how to write like a CSS mega menu by inspecting other people's sites.
Nice.
So I started off programming kind of like this offshoot way that I don't really highly recommend, and I also did a lot of documentation for Mozilla Developer Networks when I was first learning because it was kind of a struggle learning everything on my own. I was just using like free Code Camp and Code Academy and whatever. And the documentation online was out of date, so I just wrote it myself. And the funny story is, like, I tell people, like, there's a good chance you've actually read my documentation if you've ever looked at my Mozilla Developer Network. And yeah, and then I did some stuff at Free Code Camp. I got my first job actually in town at a water theme park consulting firm. So they designed water theme parks and we built construction management software. So because I had experience in both restaurant design and software, it was kind of like a good merge. So if you have industry knowledge of a specific field, it's easier to get into that field if you're starting off as a junior developer, because it's hard to find someone with both background skill sets. And then that contract ended, and then I moved to Tampa for a full stack engineering position.
Very cool, very cool. Yeah, you touched on something interesting, kind of what Cassandra said with the MySpace thing. Working in the web, we get that chance to sort of like inspect the source, right? Which is a little bit more difficult when we're talking about, you know, like desktop apps that are like binary, or even like typical server-side rendered, you know, software that sends the stuff ready down to the browser. Some of the apps that, you know, we might use, we might be able to inspect and use like Chrome extensions, like the React Chrome extension, to see what kind of components they're using and kind of like learn from that. So that's like a +1 for like web apps, that you can kind of like look behind the curtains to some extent and learn a little bit about what they're doing. So that's cool. So let's talk about a little bit about like what your day-to-day is, and kind of like how do you use, you know, JavaScript or you know, some web tools. So what is it like a typical, or, you know, not necessarily like a typical, but like a, you know, maybe like a productive day, like a day where you're like, all right, today I produced something, or I was able to write this feature. Like, what would that day like look like?
Yeah, so for me, mornings usually start with code review. We have, like, we're remote, so we got people all over, so mornings are just code review.
How do you guys do that? Is it like through like pull requests and commenting, or?
Yeah, so everyone, you know, you have your issue that you're working on, you do your work, you submit a pull request. I don't know how detailed to be.
Just like commenting on, you know.
Yeah, and then I'll look through it. Typically I'm looking through the front end code, and I look through the back end code when our one back end developer is doing it. He just needs someone else to look at it. And for me, I have to talk out loud when I'm doing code review, or I know that I'm not paying attention, and that's when I usually catch stuff. Otherwise, I'm just like skimming through, looking at lines of code. So after code review, I tend to be pretty multidisciplinary. So with our front enders, I'm like our senior front ender. So I'm doing a lot of front end code. I'm also like trying to give our juniors as much of the front end code as I possibly can, because I tend to also do a lot of our project management and take business requirements. And I have found like a little niche for myself in UX, just in that I know how to build a lot of things, so I know how to like design it so that we can build it quickly. So I tend to just be a whole lot on the front end, even before things enter the engineering pipeline. And so yeah, my day is a lot of like, usually half spent doing front end development, half spent code review and talking with clients and just making sure everything's spec'd out and it's meeting requirements, and
Cool.
that our QA tester knows how to QA properly.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. So I don't want to jump ahead, but like, how do you guys deal with stuff like, so because you mentioned, you know, pull requests, and now like I'm going back to the couple times where I ran into that issue. So like in JavaScript, there's like a million ways to do one thing, right?
Yeah.
So how do you guys deal with like code consistency? So if you have multiple developers working on a code base, and you know, say they loop through an array, you know, like in 3 different ways. Like, do you try to get everybody to do it one certain way, or you're kind of like flexible in that, like, hey, it's cool, but like,
It depends on like the rush. So like at the beginning of the sprint, it's always like pushing it back. Towards the end of the sprint, it's like, okay, we'll let this go. But yeah, we try to keep the same patterns, and really like Ian on our team tends to establish those. And a lot of times, like you establish new patterns, and half of your code base is still using the old pattern, so you try to catch it and say, oh, you copy pasted from this thing that we're not doing anymore. So yeah, we try to catch it as much as possible to have like consistent patterns throughout, but
Nice.
you know how it goes.
I think the biggest one in the React community recently was like hooks, right?
Yeah.
So when hooks were introduced, people were like, let's not do it because it's beta, right? People were like, okay, let's not do it. And then they went and did it anyway, right? And then it went, back to like, it was publicly released, officially released, and then people did like half of it, but not the entire app because really you don't need it. But then, to do hooks, like you can't have classes, right? It needs to be functions, right?
Right.
So, but in order to add the hook here, I need to redo this whole thing as a function. Well, but the class now has the lifecycle methods. How do I do it? Then you get into like this black hole, and then next thing you know, you're 1 week down that refactoring that you thought was going to take a couple hours, and then you haven't been able to produce, anything of value to your client, right? So it's quite interesting to go through those updates and features. Like anybody run into something recently with that? No? Or yes, and you just don't want to talk about it? All right,
I
cool.
think it's hard to kind of like juggle the balance there, right? Because like you said, you want to ship software and make the clients happy, but at the same time, you want to make sure that the code base is relevant and up to date.
Correct.
So it is hard to manage that.
Yeah.
But to jump back to your original question of what a typical day looks like,
Yeah.
for me, it's like two different things, right? Depends, like if I'm troubleshooting something, I have a different process, right? And for that, what I try to do is kind of like what you mentioned, where you inspect and peek behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see the API request being made. What's the data look like flowing through the application? That kind of helps me start to break things down. Then once I inspect and figure out which components are making the calls, then I'll jump in and find it in the code and add like some console logs just to see like every step of the way, like where it's going. Developers from other languages hate the fact that we use console log all the time, but it works, right? At least it does for me what I need to do. And then if I'm not troubleshooting and I'm starting off with a brand new feature, what I'll try to do is, before I write any code, I noticed that a lot of programmers will try to solution too fast. They'll jump into coding before they've thought out the process. So what I do is whiteboard it. I'll take my time, and it could be very simple, like me just drawing bubbles like here, here, and here. If David was here, he'd tell me that's a state chart. So I start off in that process, and then I start to break it down. Okay, what is this composed of, this feature set? And then I'll start to, if I recognize patterns where we're doing that somewhere else in the application, I'll go and find those components and see what they look like. If they're using classes or something old, now's the time for me to make it different. I won't touch that, I won't refactor that yet, but if I'm going to add to the project, I'm not going to copy paste old ways of doing it. I'm going to try and do it in a more relevant way. But that's about it, I would say, like for my typical day. And then if I ship a feature or I make a PR, I'll immediately try to review someone else's code before I take on another task. Because it's difficult when you get in the rhythm of things to stop and look at other people's work, but when you come to a good stopping point, it's the perfect time to go and review someone else's stuff.
Yeah, that's cool, man. And now, like, this is not an interview question, but like, do you usually write tests for like front-end components, or when you do, like, do you do it like upfront, or do you wait a little bit until like they're like mature enough that you know what you want, and then you start like validating them? Like,
so it's a great question, and it's difficult to do TDD, so test-driven development, for anyone who doesn't know, on front end, because you have to have the component working and functioning before you write tests for it. However, if it's like a function that you've built that's manipulating data that's going through, you can write a unit test for that. So you could do that up front, but what I typically do is I'll bang out the feature in JavaScript, then probably convert it to TypeScript, make sure that the types are there, and then I'll go in and add a unit test before I make the PR for it.
cool.
Yeah.
Nice. What about you, Vincent? What's your typical day look like?
So I, like Cassie, I work at a consulting firm, except Cassie, also owns it, runs it. So I'm just a lowly developer. I just build out applications. I got hired on as a front-end developer, but they transitioned me afterward to a completely lead, like all back-end development. So my typical day is kind of all over the place. So like in a consultancy firm, it's similar to an agency. Actually, it is pretty much an agency.
But you still use JavaScript on the back end?
We use Node.js on the back end.
Okay.
But just to give an overview of like what the company actually does, we build out enterprise apps from the very bottom all the way to completion. It's everything but WordPress, basically. It's kind of what Cassie does. So my day-to-day tasks, so our stand-up starts at 11 a.m., which is our daily meeting in terms of like, where we're at. We do this thing called a agile daily stand-up sprint. So basically what you do is you're in a meeting, there's all the developers inside the room, or they might be just connecting remote via Zoom or whatever, and everyone just goes in turn and talks about what they did yesterday and what they're currently working on today, and if they're blocked by anything or if they're struggling on anything that they need to work on. So that is the start of my day that I have to plan around. So things before that 11 a.m. that deadline, I'll usually go through like the task board on Jira, which is like our project management tool, to see what sort of things we have in queue for me to build out, or what things we have to kind of architect and figure out on a database level. And then from there, I'll check over and do code reviews or do pull requests and check through my other teammates' codes to make sure our development branch is up to date. And if everything is good, I'll just start actually writing code. But sometimes I'll have to do business discovery and look at what the client actually wants, because the client never tells us what they want, right? They say we want feature A, and like really they want a feature B. So there is some discovery. I'll go through the onboarding docs and go through videos, discussions between the client and our team, and look through like what they actually wanted and what my perception of what they did need. And then I'll design the database schema on the back end and do migrations, which is kind of like how you move data from one point to another. And then I'll work on the front end. So it's kind of like all over the place in terms of like what I have to do, because I don't really know what I have to do till I get there.
Yeah. Interesting. You mentioned migrations. Like, it's been a while since I last worked on like Node and database stuff, but like what's the current state? Like, is there like good tools for migration?
Yeah.
'Cause my experience with migration was with Rails. That's how I learned about migrations. That's how I used them a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they did and still do a great job at that. And I remember when I tried to do that same thing with Node, the ecosystem was just not anything like Rails. Like, how is it today?
So there's something called a ORM, which is an object relation mapper. What this does is it lets you connect your database and write almost like JavaScript like syntax, but really translate that to SQL, which is like the language that database is talking. Right. There are built-in tools for like migrating your database. So when you have a database schema, you think about like how your data is structured in a way to store the information in different parts. You might take out a table here, like connect it other places. There are built-in tools we use SQLize,
Mm-hmm.
which is what they teach at the UCF bootcamp as well. It's a popular Node.js ORM framework, and that's what we use for migrations.
Oh, nice. So SQLize has like their own migration
it's
system.
really good.
Nice. Very cool. And you two mentioned something like an opportunity for learning, if you will, that I thought was cool, which is reviewing PRs. Mm-hmm. Right? There's so many times I can remember just reviewing my friends, my colleagues' PRs, and just, even like looking at one way they're doing something that I wasn't even aware. Right? Oh, look at how they're accessing, this one key in a map or something, or look at this interesting thing that they're doing that I've never seen. Why in the world are they doing that, right? Mm-hmm. And then you can just literally copy and like paste the code on like Google Stack Overflow, and then you can like read a whole article about it, and then boom, you just learned something really cool, really useful by just reading someone else's code, right? And this extends not only to PRs, but also open source in general. I'm very grateful for the open source community, because a lot of like what I know about programming, I learned from other people who are nice enough to put their code up on the internet for people to use it freely, and most importantly for people to learn from it freely, right? So, GitHub, a lot of GitHub navigation and just like searching around. And then before GitHub, the thing was like SourceForge.net was like the big, open source website where people could put their code up and you could download, you could browse through it. Something that I particularly like doing is just looking at the source code for popular projects, so to speak, right? The most recent one that I did, because I'm working a lot of Go stuff for Pluralsight, the company that I work for. I'm doing a lot of Go video content. And one of the projects that I go back a lot is Kubernetes, right? You've probably heard of it, even if you haven't used it. Kubernetes is probably one of the most popular Go applications, and it's open source, right? So whenever I'm looking at examples of doing this one thing in Go, I know that repository is very likely to have a solid usage of that one thing I'm looking for. So I can just go to GitHub, use their search functionality, look for different occurrences of whatever I'm looking for, and kind of either validate my assumption or learn something new that I didn't know before. So yeah, that's another example of how you can use the open source to learn, right? Right, cool. So this one's interesting. So how do you read JavaScript-related news? Is it like Twitter? Do you follow certain people on Twitter? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you have certain blogs that you follow? How's it?
Yeah, so I pretty much follow any tool I'm using on Twitter, just so I can kind of see what's up. Follow Dan Abramov, a lot of the thought leaders in JavaScript. Twitter's like my go-to place for any kind of news. I haven't been listening to podcasts a lot lately, but one of my favorites was JavaScript Jabber. And I found that, listening to the podcast is one of the ways that I found that I was picking up like really kind of obscure things I would never have time to actually do. But like I could like have a conversation about it with someone else that is maybe knows more about it than me, and like have something like I know about post-process CSS now, even though that's not what we do. And so I think that's really good. If you don't have time to look into something, listening to other people talk about it's really cool. What's the one who does all the JS30 stuff?
Wes Boss.
Wes Boss. Syntax.
Yeah.
That's a pretty fun podcast. Otherwise, that's pretty much it for me. Twitter and podcasts.
Same. So my go-to source is thought leaders on Twitter. So Ivan View, Dan Abramov, Rich Harrison. I mean, this guy is like really smart. The creator of Svelte. Those are like my go-to, and then like just other people that follow them and other industry leaders. Before that, I used to read a lot of Medium articles, and what I'd warn anybody in the audience is the quality of content, right? Like before you get too deep into an article on Medium, maybe like scroll to the bottom and see how many claps it has. Like that's how I kind of like gauge whether or not I should even read it. But there is good quality there. Don't let me scare you away. Medium's great. So it's a mix of different articles online, other developers' blog posts, and I will dabble in podcasts here and there. I find it, now that I don't commute and I work from home, I don't listen to podcasts as much. So it's difficult for me to like put it on in the background and try to concentrate because I'll just like focus on what they're talking about. Whereas I used to like listen to it on my train ride or my car drive. But yeah, Syntax you mentioned was good. There's another one called Tools Tuesday. It's I forget her name. She's really awesome front-end web dev. And then another guy who's the engineering manager at Netflix. The two of them host it, and they talk about different tools like every Tuesday. So that's another really good one.
Nice. How about you?
So like Cassie and like Victor, I also listen to Syntax. I was actually listening to it right as I got here too. I think I've actually watched almost all their episodes. Just because I live in Tampa now and I have to commute back to Orlando every so often, I have a lot of time to kill in the car. So I listen to a lot of podcasts comparatively. So one is Syntax.fm, which is from Scott Talinsky from Level Up Tuts and also from Wes Boss. They do a whole podcast where they talk about different topics in the industry, and it's really engaging because it's like two senior developers going back and forth, and you're like, oh, this makes so much more sense now. Like, I heard of this before, but then like these guys are actually talking about it from an experience standpoint, and I can actually, like Cassie, I can actually have a conversation about it to my lead dev over at the company. It's like, yeah, you should think about this security protocol and this practice because that's how other people do it. And then another thing I do is I follow thought leaders on Twitter, like Dan Abramov. But I'll also follow like less prominent developers that are kind of like emerging and shooting like really fast up because I know like anything they do is really interesting and just the way they approach different problems. I also follow David K just because, state machines. So,
And awesome animations.
and a lot of memes, a lot of animations. Just follow his Twitter for that. So I follow people on Twitter. Sometimes I go on the Reddit React thread, which is hosted by Sean Wang. He's a React thought leader as well. So I just follow a bunch of.
Is this the Reddit subreddit?
It's a subreddit called r/React. I usually check there, and I check Y Combinator for news. Just like scroll through it. I don't spend too much time on there. Just like if you go look up Medium articles, you should take a certain news sources with a grain of salt because it's very pessimistic or it's very biased in a certain regard. So I'll just scroll through there, and I'll also check through like another source entirely unrelated. I'll go on Product Hunt, which is where software companies reveal like new software platforms that they're building out. So this is more coming from the entrepreneurial business mindset. And there's a lot of tooling that they build out for developers. Like here's this new tool for scanning like CSS on a web page.
Yeah.
Or here's a tool to help deploy your site faster, right? So I'll look for tool sets like that and kind of get a better understanding. I'll look through GitHub for the monthly trending JavaScript repos.
That's a really good one.
So I'll just go through that and I'll kind of like make notes. I'll go to meetups, learn about whatever topic, because I'm in Tampa because that's where I live right now. Everyone talks about cybersecurity, so I'm just learning a lot of cybersecurity now, as opposed to like React or JavaScript, which is more here. So it's different. It's a different like story, I guess.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Does anybody have any recommendations for podcasts that haven't been mentioned here?
There's one called Coding Blocks from Joe Zach. That's a really good one. It talks more about computer science principles and kind of how that practice goes into .NET development.
Yeah.
But it's not as trendy as syntax. But
Yeah. Nice. Anybody? What's up, Brad? Oh, sorry.
There's the React podcast. There's a lot. There's the syntax, animation, Java. And change a lot. Is a nice one too.
Yeah. Nice.
Real Talk JavaScript with Roundtable.
Oh yeah. Nice. Real Talk JavaScript.
Oh, nice.
Very cool.
Front end happy hours every once in a while.
Yeah.
I catch that.
That's a good one.
Nice.
Talk.
Yeah, chopped up too.
Shop Talk. Yeah, it's a good one.
And there's the one for Egghead.io.
Which one?
Egghead.io.
Egghead. Oh, they have a podcast.
That one's
Oh,
great.
they do? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Ken Dodds has a podcast now too.
Yeah.
That's a good one too.
So Brian, you had something?
Those.
Yeah.
Other than the podcast, though, I did want to mention, not too many people know about it. Okay, so obviously there's ODev Slack where you can talk to everybody here, but there's Spectrum Chat, and you can find like specific channels in there that I find very helpful. In Slack, you get a lot of people who kind of like to joke around a lot, and that's okay. Like there's a place for that. But if you're looking like just for like to learn from one another, Spectrum's really good. There's a React one on there. There's also a Front End Cafe. There's another one like CSS and JS. There's state charts on there. It's like all really good conversations being had.
So Spectrum Chat.
Yep, spectrum.chat. You could log in like with your GitHub.
I know some guys that do a local podcast. I used to work with them. It's like Junior Web
Junior.
Dev Junior.
Yeah, with Lee Work.
So,
Yeah.
Nice.
and Eddie. So,
Yep. That's it.
Yeah, they have like a Next.js channel there as well that's really
Oh, nice.
active.
Yeah.
So is it kind of like a Discourse almost?
Yeah.
It's another
Yeah,
one of
It's
those.
more like a forum, really.
More like
Okay.
Reddit. It's a,
Nice.
right?
Nice.
It's close.
I guess I'd say more like it's closer to Discord.
Is
Yeah.
it Discord? Okay.
Very cool. Nice. Yeah, I'm just like you guys. I used to listen to a lot of podcasts when I would be commuting or doing, going from point A to point B. But ever since I started working from home, I don't do that kind of thing anymore. I just sit at point A. I wake up and go to bed. So yeah, going to the kitchen is not enough time to listen to the podcast. So. Do y'all have any recent like fun personal projects? Any libraries you've discovered that you needed to use for a like a client solution or something that you thought was cool, or any or you created yourself kind of thing?
Yeah, so I was trying to remember, I haven't done a lot of personal projects lately, but a lot of the work that we've been doing for our clients it's really fun. So one of the one of the clients that I work with is Statosphere here in town, and they have to ship out a monthly box to influencers. So it's like there's this like physical component, and they have to put in these sheets that describe the products and what the influencers need to do. And so they were going on to some online thing where they could design what it's going to look like. Then they have to put it into InDesign, and then they have to set it up for print there, and then they print them out on their office computer. And they have to just take all of their products and make one sheet per product, which is like 50 products a month right now, and they need to scale this. So we built basically an editor that takes information from their products that are actually stored in WordPress right now and puts that all in there for them. And then it prints it, well, it doesn't print it, it downloads it as a PDF. And so we're taking this like HTML design thing. Then we're using Canvas to take basically a snapshot of it, and then we're putting it into JS PDF so that we can have it like 2-up and orient them the way that we need to. And I was just completely impressed that we could do all of that on the front end. I was certain that we were going to have like a server-side component for this. And then most recently we sent it off to like a professional printer where they had like very like particular specs and we needed cut lines and all of that. And it worked pretty well. So it was like HTML to Canvas and then Canvas to PDF, and it sounds like way too much like translation, and it is kind of crazy going from pixels to like print points and inches and whatnot. But that was a really fun one because it actually produced something physical in the end.
Nice.
And it's all on the front end.
Nice.
Turned out pretty well.
Very cool.
Cool. So I have 2 personal projects. I have one that I'm actually trying to ship. It's for a buddy who has a food truck out in Tallahassee, and I'm using Gatsby for that. So it's like my first dip into Gatsby. It's really cool, static generated site. Really liking that. And then there's another personal project that I keep running for like the entirety of my career. It's just I call it like my guinea pig project. Any new framework or anything that I want to try out, I try it there. That's another thing that I was going to talk about is like you want to try all these new things that come out sometimes, right? Like the new shiny objects, but like production's not the place to do it, right? So having a guinea pig project just off to the side that I can tear down and spin up again, like really allows me to have like this sandbox that I can go in and like try stuff out. So that app, it's a naturalization exam to help people to study for the citizenship test. I should actually like publish it, but anyhow, I have it now written in Svelte, so it's a new framework that I've been teaching myself on the side. And then yeah, other than those 2 things, the latest library that I've been introduced to is FPTS, so it's all functional programming TypeScript. It's a head scratcher the first time you look at it, and I have a lot to learn on it, but I'm really liking it so far.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So what's that naturalization test look like? Because I did that like 4 years
Oh,
ago.
really?
Yeah. Not
Nice.
the app though, but
Right.
the actual test. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's like a list of like 100 questions you can download and study, right? So I have that, and I have it in like 3 different languages, and I have like these flashcards that can help you like just quiz yourself on it. And then I have a quiz component on the front page that you just get like randomly 10 questions assigned to you, and you can kind of see like if you pass it on the fly. Now it's difficult because you don't go and take a multiple choice questionnaire, but I feel like it's something, right? It's better than nothing, just to help you quiz. And then the last page is just like trying to show you like voter information. Sorry, not voter, like where to go to take the test.
Nice.
That's
Nice.
for the American citizenship?
Yeah, for American
Yeah,
citizenship.
because I'm gonna take mine next few months, and I already built the one for my wife, where I could show her the one that she did wrong, so
Okay.
she can study more about those ones. I did that like a few years ago too. Like,
Awesome.
screening. So let me know because I understand.
Okay, yeah.
Very
Sounds
cool.
good.
Nice. How about you, Vincent?
So at the company that I work for, we had to recently spin off a new project for one of our clients, and it had to be in GraphQL, and no one at the company knew GraphQL, so I was pretty much tasked with architecting the entire backend in GraphQL Node.js. So it was quite a hard learning experience, learning how to integrate it all together for the first time. So there's that. For something more on a personal level or for personal projects, I like competing in hackathons, and that's just kind of the way I've like learned a lot of new things. Actually, when I first learned React, Cassie, me and Cassie competed in a hackathon, and that's actually how I learned React, believe it or not. So yeah, like little things like that. So the hackathon app that we built, it's through it's through the hackathon event called Indie Space Jam,
Mm-hmm.
run by Indie which is the game space area in Orlando. They host like an event every year for all of these students and developer that wants to build a game. And we got to build an actual like fully fleshed out video game within 48 hours. And you could check it out too. It's actually online.
Nice. What's the URL?
It is called Asteroid-Battlegrounds. .firebase app. Actually,
Firebase.
you can click the dev post because the dev post has a link to it.
This one?
Yeah, that's my dev post link.
So if anybody has a question about Firebase, Dwayne right here has all the answers.
You can play the video if you want, or you can play the actual game. Do you want to play the game or the video? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Scroll down.
Is this the
yeah,
game?
click it right there. Put the sound up all the way. Hopefully it doesn't screw up because we have memory leak issues.
Is it entirely built with Firebase on the back end?
No. Oh, sorry. You have to refresh it. You skipped the cool intro.
What'd you use for the animation?
We had a very talented videographer.
Bobby Tables.
It should work. Did you click it?
I did.
Oh, maybe we're having. It's because Firebase has to have
It's all good.
has to have a
Just
soft
need the
start right in the
information
beginning. Yeah.
Right.
We actually had our own custom. Oh, it's starting up right now.
There you go.
So you can try it out. It's the space bar, and then the arrow keys,
Nice. Oh, nice.
and it's just an endless barrage of asteroids flying in your face until you can no longer. You can move with the arrow keys, by the way. Oh.
I'm a bad gamer.
Found that out a little too late.
Yeah. So we built that in 48 hours. We had a sound produce. All the sounds were custom made. The sprites were all custom made as well. The game over screen, everything. I helped do the game production work.
Nice.
So kind of like directing what the screen flow would look like, and
Yeah.
the intro video. I kind of mocked up the entire screenplay
Nice.
for our videographer to actually produce out. So it was really fun. Just little things like that. It's always a good way to learn different industries and how they work.
Yeah, for sure.
Is that what you were complaining about on Twitter, not having like the ability
Yeah.
to rotate?
Yeah,
Like
I was-
following your journey.
I put like a devlog on Twitter. It's like I'm trying to get game mechanics to work for the first time because I don't know how to game program. But we built it in Phaser.js, which is it's a HTML game platform or game framework, and we actually try to get multiplayer up and running, but multiplayer is super complicated because you have to do physics calculations on the front end and physics calculations on the back end.
Send over the wire.
And you have to have like the state of like where all the asteroids have to be in the same for both players.
Yeah.
So we kind of dumped it out halfway. It's a single player game.
I definitely second the idea of hackathons. I think they're a great place to learn and also to meet people and network. I landed a job from a hackathon, and I also made a connection with a future director of engineering at a hackathon. So like it's led to great opportunities for me. So whether or not it leads to you a job or not, it's still good to go and meet other people and work with other people as well.
Nice, very cool. Yeah, I've had the opportunity to participate in a couple hackathons over the past couple of years. I did Node Knockout a few years ago, and then years ago I did this one called Rails Rumble, which was for Ruby and Rails. And I remember back at the time, I was able to extract actually 3 plugins out of that one hackathon projects. One of which I still help maintain up to this day. And it's like a jQuery plugin, right? And it's funny because although we don't usually hear about jQuery a whole lot with the new frameworks and all that, there's better ways to do things, but there's still an opportunity for jQuery. There's still places where jQuery is still extremely useful, and I still get emails from people on GitHub talking about how they're using the plugin. It's a simple like timer plugin, right? Like a JavaScript timer plugin. And I still get, emails from people, asking, either how to use it in a different way or telling how they're using it on their project. And it's also funny because I use it a lot for a lot of my personal projects. So I recently had to build a web view for security cameras that I have at home. So I literally put together an HTML, CSS, and JavaScript application, just like bare bones, so it could rotate between the security cameras at my house, and then I would set the timer to rotate between them every like 15 seconds, right? And then for the little, timer widget, I use my own jQuery timer plugin that I built like 5 years ago. So that was kind of cool. Again, like I would probably have never done that had I not participated in the hackathon and just, try to extract something out of it. And yeah, and there's also the fact that you can, get job opportunities out of those situations, even if, in person or, when you extract a library out of it and then, you put it out on the wild.
Yeah, so fun fact about the hackathon is that where I actually partially got my last job, I work at Cisco, so basically my manager was opening a new team here in Orlando, and he didn't know anyone in the community. So we had the React hackathon here 4 years ago, I guess, and then he joined us. And actually, we
joined
were
our team on the hackathon.
Yeah, we were in the same team, where me, my manager, and 2 other guys, and then we were not able to ship the project that day. But I was the only one able to finish my feature because we like perfect for each. Yeah, so then when I got the interview, I actually didn't have a technical interview because at least he knew a little bit, 3 or 4 hours, but he was able to say, okay, he know at least how to code this.
Yeah.
So, it's a big company, so my other coworker that I introduced there, he took 4 interviews, having whiteboard and technical interview.
Mm-hmm.
I just took 1. And I think the hackathon was part of it because we did this together. So it's a fun fact about me. Nice.
Right on.
Nice. Very cool. Now, so the next question is kind of like the first, like if you're involved in any like community events, if you attend, if you organize, like tonight is of course an example of how you actually participate and contribute to the community. So again, thank you for coming. Is there any other event that y'all are involved with?
Yeah, so I haven't been doing as much organizing as I used to, but we have Orlando Lady Devs in Orlando. I founded that organization. It's still running. And after that, I did Girl Develop It here, which Girl Develop It is kind of having a tough time. So when that kind of fell off, I didn't really get back into organizing. But lately, being the remote hermit that I am, I help out with ODevs on the board with Dwayne, and we do community outreach, social media, stuff like that.
Right on. I try to aim for at least 2 talks a year. I have one coming up in December for ODevs. I'm giving a talk on using transducers in JavaScript. So definitely come out to that if you can make it. Other than that, I'm like really active on Slack, not just to go and talk with friends, but to also help answer any questions that anybody has. So you can find me on the React channel or the JavaScript channel. I try to stay in my lane. But yeah, it's about my level of involvement.
Nice. Yeah, if anybody here is not on the Orlando Devs Leg, you should absolutely be, because that's where a lot of us like hang out, ask questions. There's channels for, like Victor said, different topics. Some of those are like soft topics. There's like job listings, that kind of thing. So
there's a career advice channel that's really good too. Yeah.
So I think a junior devs one too, I think.
Oh yeah, junior.
Now keep in mind, in Slack, when you're looking for channels, if you join ODevs, there are some channels that you're not going to see unless you know about them.
Yeah.
So make sure you like press the plus icon and actually like look at what is there, because for the longest time, what happened was I went into ODevs and then some people just like, invited me to the React channel, invited me to the JavaScript channel, and I just thought those were like the only ones that existed. And then eventually I was like, man, I need help with something in TypeScript. Oh, what's this button? Boop, TypeScript channel, like hundreds of people in it. I was like, where was this the whole time? So definitely don't like only be in the channels that you're invited to. Like search around, find what's in your interest space, because you're going to find a lot of people who are just constantly posting memes and not posting useful stuff at all. If you want useful stuff on Spectrum, clearly, but
for sure. So if you're not there, talk to any of us who are. We can like request an invite. Just tell us your email.
Yep.
Yeah. So I kind of first started off actually learning a lot through Slack, and Victor actually helped me a lot when I first started learning React development. And actually, I just found out about the TypeScript channel recently just because he posted it. So there are a lot of channels on there, and yeah, some of it is meme and shit posting, but there is some good content that you can find and good discussions that revolve around those topics. I moved to Tampa, 7 weeks ago, so now I'm not nearly as active in the Orlando community just because I live in a different city. But I'm very active in the Suncoast Developer Guild, which is the Tampa equivalent of Orlando devs. And I did a talk at the Bar Camp in Tampa recently on actually hackathons. And I didn't even know about the event till that day, and I just made a presentation 30 minutes before and presented it.
Nice.
So
That's the Bar Camp spirit, right?
yeah. And then also, I'm also pretty active in like the boot camp community, both for Orlando and for Tampa, because I do tutoring for the UCF boot camp, and I also do tutoring for the Tampa boot camp as well now. So just a little bit here and there. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice. Anyone here graduated from boot camp or currently attending boot camp? Nice. Very cool. So the funny thing about like community events, kind of like a similar story to what Bruno had at the hackathon. Like I personally had at a meetup when I moved to Orlando. This was like 2009. I remember hearing about the Ruby community, ORUG, at the time, and then I attended a few of their meetups, and then I asked if they were interested in me giving a talk, and my talk was literally like the summary of a Ruby book that was coming out around that time, and I've told this story a couple of times, but it's always valuable to some people. So I volunteered to give a talk about it was a Ruby book about refactoring, right? So I volunteered to give a talk about that book. Literally, I would explain the refactoring patterns off of that book. So it wasn't anything original. It was something that was easily accessible by anyone. Anyone could get the book. So what I'm trying to say is like I didn't come up with any like innovative solution to anything. I was literally being the messenger, right? And I wanted to share that with the community and also practice my public speaking skills. And I was also learning English at the time, so it was quite scary. So I did the talk, right? And it just so happened that the organizer at the time was starting his own consultancy, which was a very small team at the time. It was 5 or 6 people. He invited the whole team to watch my talk. And little did I know that talk was basically my interview, right? So after that talk, he offered me a freelance position to start helping them with a few of their projects. And then a couple of weeks after that, I was asked to be part of the company. I was hired full time, right? So that's like an interesting story of how you can how you should expose yourself to the community by contributing, by teaching, by giving talks, by helping people out. And I've heard about this a lot here, like people helping each other out, right? People joining the community, they don't really know how to use a specific tool or specific framework. They reach out for help on Slack. Somebody sees that they're running through some issues, decide to to lend a hand and help each other out, and that's the best way I feel to get a new job. Nothing against recruiters. No. That's definitely a legit way to get through the door, and there are some great opportunities over there. But I feel like this feels more organic, right? When you're hearing from your peers, when there's somebody from a company that's trying to bring you into the company, that kind of says something about it, right? Because if that person is legit, they're not going to try to bring you to some place that sucks to work at, right? So if you're hearing from somebody at a company that they're looking for devs, and then you can hear from that person themselves how it is to work at that company. So yeah, participating in the community is super valuable. Be as an attendant, or just attending or speaking or volunteering, whatever. So if especially for those that are graduating boot camp, try to get a job, right? This is a great way to do it. The networking and hearing from the people that are actually going to be working with you or hiring you in these examples that we just heard. All right, so last couple of questions. So what is the one thing you've heard about JavaScript and that you haven't had the chance to try it out yet. So we've talked about listening to podcasts and like indexing a bunch of things, in your head that you haven't had the chance to, like, what is maybe the one thing that you'd be interested in trying out but you haven't yet?
Yeah, I think the big one is TypeScript. I've not used it. I've seen it a little bit. I hear great things about it, and apparently you can use it in conjunction with JavaScript just fine. So that's something that I would like to look into. I
Nice.
haven't.
So there's a channel for that. No, there's left. I agree.
Yeah, for me, it would be familiarizing myself more with state charts and state machines. David's always, he's always talking to me about it. I have a direct line to him, but it's one excuse after the other as to why I haven't started it yet. I need to, but I don't know. I'm just really stubborn on trying it. To me, it's just like another form of state management. I really like what I use now. It gets the job done. In order to stop doing that and learn this entirely new paradigm would take away from what I can ship. So I guess that's my ultimate reason, but it is something like really high on my priority.
Nice. You should use it in your pet project for
exactly.
naturalization.
Yeah, I am actually.
There you go.
For the quiz component.
Nice. What about you, Vincent?
So, like Cassie and like Victor, I've also had an interest in TypeScript and also state machines. But my real interest right now is actually in 3D like web development, which I did do a talk on that like last year, but I haven't really like deep dived into it. There's just so much stuff you can do with WebGL, which is, that's not WebGL, but anyways, if you have like a 3D video game on the web, that is using WebGL. And there's so many cool things you can do with it. There's so many like special effects you can do with CSS only. And I haven't really built anything with it, and I kind of want to get my hands dirty and like doing some cool like things on the front end where it's like, hey, you can upload an image and then you can download a GIF from it, and that GIF will be like, you'll take an image of like the sunset or something, right? And then there's water in the background, and then you post-process that, and then it looks like the water is like flowing, and there's different properties you can use to do that, either with CSS on the front end or some sort of like machine learning on the back end. But there's just so many like cool things out there in image processing that I've not really explored, and I kind of want to explore. So there's that.
Nice, very cool. Now kind of the opposite question, like what is the one thing in JavaScript that you've been able to avoid and that you would want to keep avoiding?
Yeah, the big one for me, I just like was at an event and I saw the code and I was just like, so glad I'm not doing that, and it was just Angular. Like, Angular 1 to React. Like, I struggled to learn React, but it's like I never really knew what JavaScript meant until I like saw Angular 4, whatever it is now, code, and I was just like, I just don't want all these extra symbols, like. And I've only ever done JavaScript, so I figure it must just be influenced by programmers of other languages. I just don't know. It's not intuitive. I just don't want to have anything to do with it.
For me, Objective-C is a real scary one.
Objective-C,
that is like, freaks me out. It's like with all the brackets and stuff.
Well, I think now, unless you're dealing with like legacy apps, I think
Swift, thank God, but like,
Swift, sorry, yeah.
But otherwise, I'm pretty open to most things. Like we're implementing new patterns and stuff all the time, and it's a pain in the butt. But I feel like I learn every time we adopt a new pattern. So.
Nice.
Yeah. So for me, I haven't purposely been avoiding it, but I've yet to be like put on the spot at a job for like really good design skills in CSS. And every job I'm like, is this it? Is this where I get exposed? Because I'm terrible at CSS. No, but I do want to get better at it, and I do push myself to like learn things along the way. But I haven't had like super heavy like custom UI work given to me. A lot of it's like data manipulation and just data plumbing.
Nice.
Yeah.
There's a question back there.
Yeah, what's up?
I was just going to offer, I kind of found myself in the same camp, and I found Kevin Powell online.
Okay.
He's awesome at breaking down, like,
Really?
from like a programmer to CSS person, like, did all this stuff and really awesome.
Kevin Powell?
Kevin Powell.
Okay, cool.
Powell?
Powell,
But definitely have to check that out.
yeah. I do get to speed fast.
Politician?
I don't think that's.
I think he was on the real one, right?
I think he has, he managed like a Scrimba tutorial, I believe, like a paid one now. But that guy right there.
Ah, cool. Nice.
Good to know.
Yeah, that would get you right up to speed. That right there is.
Don't worry, you still have to learn Jackson.
I didn't take the camp or anything, but the guys legit.
Nice.
Right on.
Michael Jackson is another guy not to get confused with.
Oh yeah.
He's one of
I thought you were
the
gonna say at the CSS
people behind
course.
the React training, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
React, he wrote React Router.
Yeah.
Oh, he wrote React Router?
Or he co-wrote it.
Okay. Nice.
And Reach Router too.
Another question.
Yeah.
Yeah, do any of you guys plug into Udemy? I say Udemy.
Yeah.
I use it all the time.
Do you use that as a resource at all for anything? Do you find it useful?
Yeah, I think I have used Udemy. What I find the most use in now, I keep a running subscription to either Egghead or to Front End Masters. Front End Masters is amazing. Yeah, but here's the thing, they're really expensive. I think, anyways. Front End Masters is like, yeah, if you can expensify it, please do. But otherwise, it's like $40 a month. But I will tell you that you get a lot of usage out of it, a lot of knowledge.
I do the annual subscription, they always have like promotion on Black Friday, so it's not that hard. It's
Sorry
like
about that.
150.
For which one?
For both, like 150 for one and 150 for another one.
Oh, okay.
Usually at Black Friday, I do the annual one, so.
Oh, that's
it's
smart.
not that expensive, so yeah.
Yeah, hot tip. Look for it on Black Friday.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Yeah, I offer this as well. There's one called the Course Hunters. It's like a shady Russian site. Yeah, so like, if you have a throwaway gift card, I wouldn't run my credit card through it. It's like $2.
Yeah.
It has every Udemy course, every paid course.
Awesome.
Might as well go pirating at that
Yeah,
point.
and offer that. It takes a little while to be producing it.
Yeah.
For those of you that may not have the expense account, that's an option.
There's another thing. If you're a resident within Orlando, which I'm guessing everyone is, you can go to the local library and you can get a free lynda.com subscription.
Yeah.
Which is really good and it's free. Actually, they have a lot of great stuff at the library. Sometimes I go there and use it as an office. No one knows. You're
They
not
have like
supposed to.
studio at Melrose Center,
The third
right?
floor, yeah. Melrose
Yeah.
Center.
Yeah.
I just used one of their study rooms as a conference room today, and I was surprised at
Yeah.
how nice it is. Like glass
It's
walls and dry
nice,
baseboard.
yeah.
That's cool.
It wasn't even in the Melrose
You can do
Center.
your interviews there. I've actually done an interview while I was in a conference room.
Nice.
Excuse me, what was the subscription that you got?
So it's at the Orlando Library downtown. They have a lynda.com subscription that is associated with your library card, and the library card is free.
It's like
Well, actually, it's like $10, but it's
LYNDA.
yeah, LYNDA.
It's on bottom?
No,
free
LinkedIn bottom.
LinkedIn, that's what.
It's also called LinkedIn Learning
But
now.
then,
Oh
can
yeah.
it, Microsoft buy LinkedIn?
Acquired.
I'll use this opportunity to plug
Yeah.
Yeah.
one of our sponsors, which happens to be my employer as well. So those are the two reasons, but also the third reason is that like I use them a lot, not just because I work there, but like they're also an online, tech skills platform, bunch of tech stuff in general for whatever your needs are: software development, data, design, business, and they have this cool stuff I showed last time here. It's called Role IQ and Skill IQ. Let me see this. So here, Moral site, Role IQ. Which one? Yeah, it's right here. So this is really cool. If you're confused with all the different terminology that's used in the industry, right? Especially if you're new to the industry, but also a lot of experienced people like don't really know what all these like new roles are, right? So you might be wondering like, what does it take to be an ASP.NET developer? What does it take to be an Angular developer, a React developer, right? So what's cool about Pluralsight is that we've put together all these roles from looking at the industry. So we look at the industry, we see what the trends are, what the employers are asking for, and then we go deep into what it takes to be to fulfill that role, right? Let's see if I can click here. Let me find one related to the JavaScript, like node developer, right? So you click on node developer. What does it take to be a node developer? And then we break that down into individual skills, right? So you need to know Node.js, you need to know about NPM, JavaScript, Git, web app security, all these things. And then each one of these things is broken down into their own individual courses that we have to offer, right? And what we do is, you can see here on the right, I'm not logged in, but on the right here, you can take assessments that will dictate where you are in the spectrum of novice, proficient, and expert on each one of those areas. Based on your placement, it will suggest content to get you better, closer to, proficient and expert, right? And then we do that in the granular level of each one of those skills, but also that reflects the role itself. So the more assessments that you take, the more content that you watch, the more we'll be able to tell how close you are to being an expert of whatever skill you are ramping up at, right? So I think this is freaking awesome. Again, they're one of our sponsors for the meetup. They are my employer, but I also use them as like an end user to level up on the different things that I'm learning, right? Recently I was doing a lot of like AWS learning, because I had no idea of all the different services that AWS comes out with, and like it's just too much, right? And like I didn't want to spend the time trying to figure out what I needed to learn. So I just went to Pluralsight, clicked on the role, and then they broke down everything that I needed to do to fulfill that role. So I would just like sat there and watched it, took the assessments, and then I knew what was happening, right? And going back to what Cassidy said about the podcast and indexing stuff in your head, it doesn't necessarily makes me an expert, but like once you watch it, once you hear about it, like the next time that a problem comes up, you know that might be a potential solution. So that kind of puts you one step ahead of somebody that hasn't even heard about that solution, right? So because you heard about it and you know kind of what it does, you can go straight to that and like read more about it and then take another course, experiment with it and then solve your problem, rather than somebody that doesn't even know what that thing does, right? So I just wanted to plug that. Anybody here uses Pluralsight? Have used it in the past, or?
My past job had like accounts and stuff.
Cool, nice. So yeah, check that one out too. And again, it's not the one solution. Like it's my favorite for other reasons, but I'm also a huge fan of Egghead since like the very beginning. I remember when whatever his name is, Joel. He used to work at JetBrains, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was an employer for JetBrains, which was the company behind like an IDE, Java Mine, Ruby Mine or something. WebStorm. And I remember back in the day, he was. We were at a conference and they had a JetBrains booth, right? And then Joel and like two other people were there. There was a huge line to talk to Joel about Egghead. Nobody gave a shit about JetBrains. That's awesome. So yeah, it's awesome to see them growing and like doing really well. So yeah. So does anybody have any other questions? Any other comments, suggestions? What's up?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I know the speaker in the middle talked about Svelte and Loop framework. Are there other frameworks that the other speakers are looking into, things that may not even be JavaScript but might fit what you guys are doing?
Really no more. I'm like, I live in my like JavaScript React bubble. I don't really do a whole lot outside of that. I mean, the most I do is like React Native. It's a little different.
There is some stuff if you're in the .NET world called Blazor, which I don't know that much about, but supposedly it's a really big thing over there. I think you can directly convert your code to WebAssembly and push it to the web, so you don't have to write JavaScript anymore. You just write in C#.
Well, that's for like TypeScript does that now. Rust especially is for that.
Yeah.
And so like, but like, don't jump into native modules unless you're doing like really big stuff, because like there's this native. When you're doing a native module, you'd be tempted to like do everything with it, but as it turns out, there are these like mandatory headers for individual like pieces of native code. So you can't really ship tiny little utility libraries that are like, oh, this is so much faster. This algorithm is really like it has to be way faster for it to be worth you downloading basically a 2 megabyte package just to run a WebAssembly thing. It's like WebAssembly is great, but like if you're like running Unity on the web or like something really intense,
Like Unreal Engine and
Exactly.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask something along that line. You know, you do graphic work, and as the applications get more complicated, you know, speed becomes an issue, and just, you know, deployment becomes an issue. Is JavaScript always going to kind of be, you know, kind of like the Swiss Army knife that, you know, gets the job done, and, you know, for many business applications, that's what the customer really should be getting.
Sure.
But there's always that area that, you know, you have to take into consideration A, complexity, or B, just pure speed. You know, you were mentioning Rust, and, you know, Rust is really hard. I mean, you have to obey a lot of rules, and it's not like that intuitive. You have to really be,
I like to think of it like the difference between using like React Native or back in the day Cordova versus like shipping a native app, right? Like back before we had Swift and Swift UI and all this cool stuff that's coming out that really like changes the field a little bit. But like kind of back when we were status quo, if you wanted to make a iOS app and you were doing like, you know, storyboards and Objective-C, and it was just like scary and like super difficult, and you didn't have live reload and all that stuff, you'd go into React Native, right? Like it would be like, cool, that's an option. And if your customer only needed like, you know, some interface for their like boutique, you know, or needed some
that's the
custom,
right size for that customer.
like if it was just like an interface, like some data entry, something I just like say like, oh, I should do.
Phantom, if you guys could maybe speak to the tooling that you use, like CI/CD,
Oh, yeah.
or things that you use in your workflow, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, I'll jump to that, but I did want to touch on something you said. I think that JavaScript is like a Swiss Army knife. You can target a lot of different devices. Now, in terms of speed, we have to be good custodians of the web, right? We have to monitor what it is that we're shipping. So that makes you think about the type of packages you're bringing into the application. For instance, like a date package, you could use something like Moment, and it's going to cost you on the other side, where it takes a lot of speed away from the client. Whenever all that's put over the wire. But to jump back to your question, so in terms of CI/CD, fortunately enough, I only have to concern myself with the front end for production. For my personal projects, I'm using Gatsby, which just generates the static site. And then I'm also using Netlify as my host. And I have it set up with my GitHub repository so that when I push to my master branch, it automatically triggers the build and ships it out. So there's a lot of tools available to you nowadays that don't require you to be a full stack expert to know everything about, you know, the continuous deployment process.
Well, like some stuff, because I kind of like to hang out with like the DevOps guys to kind of see what they're doing, and so they were using like Jenkins and some other stuff. So you'd push your code, they would pull it down, build it, and then do all these different things. But where I'm at now, they're using Travis or something like that. And what's cool is like you'll push something, and then it'll run all the tests, and it'll deploy like your PR to like Heroku, so you can actually see it, and, like deploy it and play around with it and stuff. And then when you're good, it'll push it to that main branch or whatever. And so I thought that was pretty cool. I've never seen that before. We'll deploy like a test app just so you can play around with it and actually see it in addition to those stuff.
I've been working with some massive data sets and doing statistical analysis on it. And, you know, there were days that I would have to just leave the machine for like 48 hours.
Wow.
You know, I mean, that's how, you know, processor intensive it is. And I wonder if it's the language or, you know what I mean? Like if I was to go down to like the systems level with Rust or something like that, I probably could do it in like half the time.
Well, I mean, is it like a single threaded or a multi-thread? Because your
well,
CPU
that
utilization is
makes
like a big deal
difference.
there.
There are libraries that will do the multi-threading, you know, but not all of them can work with that. So,
well, I mean, Node,
you know.
Node has a lot of features that work pretty well with, like if worker processes.
Yeah, you can do that, yes.
I'm not sure what that's like. You can like rent GPUs and stuff.
Are you doing this data processing with JavaScript?
No.
Oh,
no,
okay.
JavaScript.
Okay.
No, but it becomes an issue. You
Right,
know, like,
right.
Sure.
And it depends upon what you're doing. If, for instance, some of the applications that you were speaking about, you don't have, gigabytes of data that you have to work with.
Definitely not.
That's not part of the plan.
Probably wouldn't recommend JavaScript for that.
Yeah.
I think we're all pretty aware that JavaScript can be pretty inefficient, but like where my company lives is usually in like the 0 to 1 area where like unless speed is a problem, it's not a problem, which it's usually not.
I mean, let's be frank, JavaScript is not really that great of a language. It's that it's readily available.
It's
everywhere.
accessible and you can build stuff quickly with it.
The nice part about JavaScript is you can write it on the front end and you can write it on the back end. And you don't have to think about translating different languages and syntax. It's just all the same thing.
Yeah, that is a huge benefit.
Just to bring it back to the CI stuff, we're a pretty small team, so we don't have like dedicated DevOps. We just use GitHub and Circle CI, and we have the same process. When we push it up, it runs all of our tests, it does the build, and it's pretty sweet. And I didn't have to set it up, but it's nice.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't handle any of the CI/CD at my company, so I don't entirely know how it's set up, so I can't tell you.
Yeah, I've used Circle CI before. I think it's really good.
Because
Especially,
it's only like it works really well with GitHub and maybe only with GitHub. So I think that's one of the reasons why we chose to go with GitHub instead of Bitbucket, which we were using before.
Bitbucket has CI built in.
Okay.
I think that GitLab has its own thing that you use.
But yeah, we really like Circle CI, so kind of went GitHub for that reason.
Nice.
Right on.
Cool.
So if you pull out your crystal balls over the next couple of years, especially someone getting more into JavaScript or trying to build out their career, getting prepared, because I hear a lot of the libraries or frameworks, stuff like that you guys have been discussing. What are the top 3 that you think someone now needs to be picking up to make sure that they are set up to be productive and highly in demand in the next couple of years?
So why do you think about it real quick? So this is going to be the last question. Once we're done with this, Chris, real quick, do we need to stack up the chairs?
Yeah, we just 6, 7 people out pretty much.
Okay, cool. So we're just going to leave the front row as is, and I'm going to ask for your help to stack up the other ones. And then we can hang out here until 9 o'clock, but then we need to be out of here just out of respect to Chris because he needs to go home. And all right, cool. Back to the question.
So for me, it's React. I feel like React is like the professional front end framework that people are using. I know there's Vue. I've never played with it. I don't even really know what the ecosystem is like. But for me, like if you're going down a custom web app dev, like React is the way to go. And then Node. I mean, I kind of just stick with JavaScript so I can be good at it. But
I think just to add to your answer, I think what's also like interesting about React and other communities are looking into it is like the component-based paradigm, right? And I believe Swift UI is trying to do something along those lines. I don't think it's as mature as React is right now, but yeah, I'll second that. Like the whole component thing, the whole way to think about state and propagation, I think it's a game changer.
yeah, it's made me a much better developer in general.
So I usually don't think of like what technologies, I do think about what technologies are kind of here to stay. Kind of how I approach learning new frameworks is I think of it as a new way for me to learn new design patterns. So design patterns is like the principle behind actually the framework itself. So when I first started learning React, and Cassie kind of helped me out when it came to the hackathon, I finally got my grasp in understanding React. It took me like 3 months to understand React. It's very complicated if you've never done anything like that. So I forgot what I was going to say actually, but that pattern. So I learned React first, and then the first place that I worked at actually didn't use React; they used Vue. So I had to learn Vue for the first time and learn the paradigm and structure there. And going from one framework to another actually taught me a lot of different things and concepts I didn't have originally in React. So Vue has the concept of observables, where you can take a variable and watch it from another variable, and React doesn't really have anything like that out of the box. So it was a cool way to see like pros and cons between 2 different frameworks. And then I also briefly learned Angular and kind of saw the overlap between React and Vue and how both of them were kind of similar in that mindset to Angular. And that's taught me how to become a better developer just in writing pure vanilla JavaScript. So understanding the principles behind the actual design and code and the standards really helps you pick up those frameworks really quickly.
Yeah, so I'm just going to piggyback off the same answer. Rather than prescribe to you a dedicated like framework that I think you're gonna, you should learn now and use for the next 5 years, I think learning the fundamentals and the principles up front is going to carry you a long way. Because whether or not you choose Vue, Ember, or Angular, or whatever you choose, you're going to learn something up front that's going to be applicable to the next language. Framework. Now they do it different in every different framework, but the fundamentals are still there, and that's going to be static throughout. And JavaScript is, like I said earlier, you can target so many different devices. When you have that under your belt, you can jump from different frameworks as you see fit. But look at job listings around you. Look at the community around the frameworks, and that'll start to tell you where the most activity is.
Nice. Awesome. Great answers, great questions. Thanks everybody for coming. Thank you to our guests for being available and hanging out with us tonight.